My name is Naomi Jean Washington. I'm 31 years old. 16 years ago, at a family reunion in Conroe, Texas, my mother stood up in front of 43 relatives' cousins, aunts, uncles, neighbors who'd known me since I was born, and said these words out loud. "This is Kezia. She's my pride." Then she looked at me, and this one. "She's my burden. Always been." Nobody laughed, but nobody said a word either. I was 16 years old. I stood there in the August heat with a paper plate going soft in my hand, and I told myself, "Don't you cry, not here." Not in front of all these people. I didn't cry, but I never forgot. And neither did Big Mama. What my mother didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Big Mama had been keeping a record. Quietly, patiently, for years. And when she passed, she left something behind that would change every single thing. Before I tell you what that was, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story. I'd also love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Drop it in the comments below. Now let me take you back to where it all started. To understand what happened, you need to understand where I come from. The Washington family had lived in Third Ward, Houston for 3 generations. My great-grandparents bought their lot on Dowling Street in 1941, back when Black families in Houston were building something out of nothing, brick by brick, Sunday by Sunday. Every house on that block had a story. Every porch had a grandmother. My grandmother, Big Mama Celestine May Washington, lived 45 minutes north in Conroe on land her own mother had left her, 38 acres. A white wood frame house with a tin roof, a vegetable garden along the east fence, and one enormous live oak tree in the front yard that had been there longer than any of us. When Big Mama walked into a room, people straightened up. Not from fear, from respect. My mother, Gloria May Washington, was Big Mama's youngest daughter, and Gloria was nothing like her mother. Gloria was light-skinned close enough to the old measuring stick that certain aunties called her the pretty one, before she was old enough to know what was being measured. She had long, pressed hair and a smile she deployed strategically. She cared about appearances, about what the neighbors thought, about how her family looked standing next to her. That last part is important, because her 2 daughters did not look the same. Kezia came firstborn with Gloria's coloring light brown, nearly golden in summer. From the moment Kezia arrived, Gloria treated her like proof of something, like a trophy she hadn't known she was competing for. I came 3 years later, medium brown, deep and warm, with thick natural hair that needed time and patience. In Gloria's eyes, I was different, and different in our house meant less. The rules were never written down. You just learn them fast. Kezia got the new Easter dress every spring, pastel satin white gloves, patent leather shoes. She sat in the second pew at Greater New Hope right next to Gloria, where the light came through the stained glass. I wore Kezia's dress from the year before, always too big in the shoulders, too short at the hem. I sat in the 4th pew, sometimes the 5th. When Kezia was in middle school, Gloria paid $60 a month for dance classes. When I asked in 7th grade if I could take an art class that cost $22 for the whole semester, Gloria said we couldn't afford it. That same week, she bought Kezia a new pair of Air Force Ones for no reason at all. I did the art class anyway. My homeroom teacher, Miss Yvette Parker, paid for it herself and never told me. I found out years later when I went back to thank her. She waved her hand and said, "Baby, I knew you had something. Wasn't about to let $22 stand in the way." She was the first person who ever looked at me and saw something worth investing in. The sharpest differences weren't about money, though. They were about language. Kezia brought home a B- on a history test. Gloria put it on the refrigerator. "She's trying so hard. I'm so proud of her." I brought home a 97 on the same test. Gloria set it on the counter without looking up. Don't get a big head. I was 11 years old. I stood there holding that paper and tried to understand what I had done wrong. I hadn't done anything wrong. I know that now. But at 11, you don't have the language yet. You just absorb it. You file it away and tell yourself, try harder. Take up less space. Make it easier for her to love you. I tried that for years. It never worked. Here is what I learned instead. When you grow up invisible in your own house, you become very good at watching. You notice everything because nothing is handed to you, and you have to find it yourself. You learn to read rooms, to build things quietly in the margins where no one is looking. That habit building in silence would save me later. Big Mama saw it before I did. She drove down from Conroe every third Sunday. After service, while Gloria held court in the parking lot, Big Mama would find me. She'd sit with me on the church steps and ask real questions. Not how's school, but what are you building? What do you want? I wasn't used to being asked what I wanted. The first time she asked, I sat there for a long moment. Then I said, I want to build things, real things, buildings. Big Mama nodded like I'd said the most sensible thing in the world. Then that's what you're going to do, she said. No conditions, no qualifiers, just certainty. I held on to that for years. What I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that Big Mama was paying attention to everything, every comparison, every refrigerator report card and countertop report card, every Easter dress, every dollar spent on Kezia and withheld from me. She was watching, and she was keeping a record of her own. The summer I turned 17, I got the highest score in my school on the statewide math assessment. Not the highest in my class, the highest in the entire school, 812 students. The principal called the house to tell Gloria personally. Gloria said, "Thank you for letting us know." Then she hung up and went back to watching television. I was standing 4 feet away. I heard the whole thing. I waited. Maybe she'd turn around. Maybe she'd say something. She reached for the remote and changed the channel. 3 weeks later, Kezia passed her driver's test on the 3rd attempt. Gloria took her to Red Lobster, called Auntie Lorraine, called 3 church friends, posted on Facebook. So proud of my baby girl, she did it. 47 people liked it. My math score never made it to Facebook. I told myself it didn't matter. I almost believed it. The summer before my senior year, our high school announced a scholarship competition, $2,500, for the best student design proposal for improving the school campus. I spent 6 weeks on my entry. I drew floor plans by hand. I researched load-bearing walls and natural light angles. I proposed converting an unused storage wing into a student wellness center, a reading room, a quiet study space, and a small garden courtyard accessible from the hallway. I won. The principal announced it at a school assembly. My name on the PA system. I came home with the check. Gloria looked at it for a long moment. "Where'd you get this?" "I won the design competition at school." She turned it over, checking if it was real. "Don't spend it all at once." Then she handed it back and walked to the kitchen. No hug, no congratulations, nothing. I deposited that check the next morning and opened my first savings account at the Chase branch on Almeda Road. The teller, an older Black woman named Miss Claudette, smiled at me and said, "Starting young, good for you, baby." That felt like more than anything I had gotten at home. Senior year, I applied to Prairie View A and M University on a full academic scholarship, tuition, housing, meal plan, everything covered. I told Gloria at dinner. She was serving Kezia a second helping of smothered chicken. "Prairie View," she repeated, flat, not excitement, not pride, just the word sitting there. "Full scholarship, I don't need anything from you." Something moved across her face. I still don't know what it was. "Well," she said. "Good." 2 months later, Kezia announced she was applying to Houston Community College. Gloria cried actual tears, called Auntie Lorraine. Called the church ladies, bought Kezia a new laptop, $840, so she'd have everything she needed. I left for Prairie View in August with a secondhand laptop I'd bought from a classmate for $75. I packed my 2 suitcases and called a cab. Gloria was at a church auxiliary meeting. Kezia waved from the couch. The family reunion happened the summer before my junior year of college. Every 2 years, the Washington family gathered at Big Mama's property in Conroe. Cousins from Dallas, aunts from Beaumont, neighbors who had been attending so long, they were practically blood. Big Mama would start cooking Thursday. By Saturday afternoon, the yard was full card tables under the oak tree, a speaker playing old school R and B children, running through the grass, the smell of ribs and cornbread drifting from the kitchen. I drove up from Prairie View alone. I was 20 years old, $2,000 in my account from a summer internship, a portfolio review on Monday. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was becoming someone. The afternoon was going well. I was sitting with Auntie Lorraine and 2 cousins talking about nothing in particular when Gloria stood up. She waited until enough conversations had died down, until enough heads had turned. Then she raised her cup of sweet tea and smiled the way she smiled when she wanted an audience. "I just want to say how proud I am of my girls." I looked up. "Kezia is working now, doing so well." She gestured toward Kezia, who beamed. "This one right here, this is my pride." 43 people looked at Kezia. Then Gloria's eyes found me. The smile stayed on her face, but something behind it shifted, something deliberate, something that had been sitting there waiting for the right moment. "And this one," she said. 2 seconds of silence. "She's my burden, always been." The yard didn't erupt. It didn't gasp. It did something worse, it fractured. A few conversations kept going oblivious somewhere at the far tables. But the people close enough to hear went completely still. My cousin DeAndre mid-reach for a rib stopped moving. Miss Celestine Big Mama's neighbor of 30 years set her paper cup down slowly on the card table without looking away from Gloria. Uncle Wendell, who never stopped talking at these things, said nothing. Someone laughed. A short airless sound, the kind people make when they don't know what else to do with their body. Then silence again. I did not look at my mother. I looked at the live oak tree, at the way the afternoon light broke through the leaves in uneven pieces, golden green shifting with the wind. I counted the main branches the way I used to count things when I needed something to hold on to. 1, 2, 3, 4. I could feel 43 pairs of eyes making decisions about where to look. The ice in someone's cup shifted. A child somewhere in the yard called out a name, bright oblivious, gone as fast as it came. The speaker in the corner was still playing. Luther Vandross, low and warm, entirely indifferent to what had just happened. Auntie Lorraine's hand found my arm under the folding table. Not a pat. A hold, firm and steady the way you hold someone when you want them to feel the weight of another person choosing to stay beside them. She leaned close. "Don't you let that woman define you," she said, low, even, like she had been saving those exact words for exactly this moment. "You hear me? Not today, not ever." I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. "Look at me." I looked at her. "You are not what she just said. You have never been what she just said." I held her gaze for 3 seconds. Then I nodded again and looked back at the tree. Across the yard through the kitchen window, Big Mama stood at the sink. She was not washing dishes. She was watching eyes on Gloria, not on me. Her face was closed and still in the way it got when something had moved past the point of words into the territory of action. I didn't know what she was deciding, but something was being decided. I could feel it the way you feel a change in weather before the sky shows it, a shift in pressure, a stillness in the air that means something is coming. Gloria sat back down. She picked up her sweet tea like nothing had happened, like she had simply made a factual observation about the weather. Kezia did not look at me. Her hands were in her lap. Her face was pointed at the table in front of her. I watched her for a moment, the way her shoulders had come and the way she had made herself small in the aftermath of being called the pride. And I understood for just a second that Kezia had not asked for this either, that she had been handed a role she didn't know how to put down. That understanding didn't make the moment hurt less, but it would matter later. The worst part wasn't what Gloria said in front of those 43 people. The worst part was the 3 seconds after that familiar undertow. Maybe she's right. Maybe this is just what I am to her. Maybe I have always been too much and not enough at the same time. That feeling didn't last long. Auntie Lorraine's hand on my arm pulled me back, but it came. And it would keep coming for years until I finally had the language to name it for what it was. Not the truth about me, just the story Gloria had needed to tell herself. I graduated from Prairie View A&M in May of 2012. Architecture degree, 3.9 GPA, Dean's List every semester except one. The semester my father had a minor stroke, and I drove back to Houston every weekend for 6 weeks straight while still turning in every assignment on time. The graduation ceremony was held outdoors on the main quad. It was a warm morning, the sky that particular shade of blue you only get in Texas in late spring. There were maybe 2,000 people in the stands. Families with signs and balloons and cameras. The marching band. The whole thing. I had 4 tickets. I gave one to Auntie Lorraine, one to my roommate Tasha's mother, who had become something like a surrogate family to me over 4 years. One to Dr. Okafor, my studio professor. The fourth ticket I had set aside for Gloria. I called her 3 weeks before graduation. I told her the date, the time, the address. I told her parking was available off University Drive and that the ceremony started at 10 in the morning. She said, "I'll try to make it." I had learned by then what "I'll try" meant from Gloria Washington. It meant no. It meant she had already decided and was just being soft about it because she didn't want the argument. But I sent the ticket anyway, because some part of me, some stubborn, still hoping part, wasn't ready to stop trying. The morning of graduation, I checked my phone at 8:45. No messages. I put on my cap and gown alone in my dorm room. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long moment. 4 years, thousands of hours in the studio, $75 laptop, no new clothes, no care packages, no voice on the phone saying you're doing great. Baby, keep going. Just me. And what I had built out of nothing. I squared my shoulders and walked out. When they called my name, Naomi Jean Washington, Bachelor of Science in Architecture, summa cum laude, I heard it before I saw her. A sound from the left side of the stands. Loud, clear, unselfconscious. "That's my grandbaby. That's my Naomi. Go on, baby, Big Mama." She was on her feet in the fourth row, waving a handmade sign that said, "Naomi Jean, we are so proud," in gold and purple letters, Prairie View's colors. She had driven 45 minutes from Conroe that morning, alone, with her bad hip, in her good church shoes. I stopped walking for exactly 2 seconds. Then I smiled the biggest, realest smile I had smiled in 4 years. And I kept going across that stage. Gloria was not there. I found out later she had taken Kezia to a hair appointment that morning. Kezia was getting a press and curl for a date that weekend. A hair appointment. I filed that information in the same place I filed everything else. The refrigerator, the Red Lobster, the laptop, the 4-minute phone calls. I filed it, and I kept walking. After the ceremony, Big Mama found me on the lawn outside the auditorium. She was moving slowly. Her hip had been bothering her for months. But she got there. She wrapped both arms around me and held on for a long time without saying anything. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were wet. She reached into her purse and took out a plain white envelope. "This is for you," she said. "Don't argue with me about it." Inside was $1,500 in cash. And beneath the money, folded once, a piece of lined notebook paper in Big Mama's handwriting, large, careful letters, the way she always wrote when something mattered. "This land will be yours one day. Keep building, baby girl." Big Mama, I read it twice. "What does this mean?" I asked. She smiled. That particular smile, the one that meant she knew something and wasn't ready to say it yet. "It means what it says," she told me. "When the time comes, you'll understand." I folded the note and put it back in the envelope. I kept that envelope in my desk drawer for years. Through 3 apartments, 2 job changes, 1 cross-city move. I never threw it away. The years after graduation were lean and steady. I got a position at a mid-size architecture firm in Midtown Houston, Hargrove and Associates, starting at $48,000 a year. Not glamorous, but it was real. It was mine. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment in the East End. Furnished it slowly, one piece at a time. A second-hand drafting table first, then a bed frame, then a couch. I cooked most of my meals at home. I saved aggressively 15% of every paycheck every month without fail. I was building something. I didn't have a name for it yet. But I knew the shape of it, the way you know the shape of a building before you have the plans drawn. Gloria called every few weeks during those years. The calls had a predictable structure. First updates about Kezia, then eventually a request. Kezia needed help with her car payment, $300 just this once. Kezia's landlord was threatening to evict her. Could Naomi cover 1 month's rent just to buy time Gloria's church dues were behind? Would Naomi mind sending a little something? I sent money. Not all of it, not without limit. But I sent it month after month because they were family. And because I still believed, still stubbornly against all evidence, that doing the right thing would eventually mean something. I never mentioned it to Kezia. Yeah, Kezia never thanked me. I'm not sure she knew. One Sunday, Big Mama called during her usual after-church check-in. "You still sending your mama money?" she asked. I hesitated. "Sometimes." A pause. "How much?" I told her. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Naomi, you are holding that family together. You know that, right? You're the one. You've always been the one. Big Mama. I'm not saying it to make you feel good. I'm saying it because it's the truth and somebody needs to say it to your face. Another pause. They just don't know it yet, but they will. I didn't know what she meant by that last part. Not then. Big Mama's health began to decline in 2018. First the hip surgery, then a small stroke that left her with a tremor in her left hand. She stayed in the Conroe house, refused to leave, refused to move in with anyone, refused to give up her garden. Her neighbor, Miss June, checked on her daily. I drove up every other weekend. Gloria visited twice in 2 years. Kezia visited once. She stayed for an hour and a half and spent 40 minutes of it on her phone. I was the one who drove Big Mama to her cardiology appointments at Memorial Hermann. I was the one who stocked her refrigerator and fixed the porch step that had been loose since 2017, and sat with her on Sunday afternoons watching old movies she'd seen 50 times. Those Sundays were some of the best hours of my life. We didn't always talk. Sometimes we just sat. The Conroe house had a particular quiet to it, the kind of quiet that felt full rather than empty. Wind in the oak tree, mockingbirds, the smell of whatever Big Mama had in the slow cooker. One afternoon about 6 months before she passed, Big Mama looked at me from her chair and said out of nowhere, "I've taken care of things, Naomi. You won't have to worry." Big Mama don't talk like that. I'm not being morbid. I'm being practical. She folded her hands in her lap. I've been practical my whole life. I'm not stopping now. She picked up her sweet tea. End of conversation. I drove home that evening with the windows down the Houston skyline coming up on the horizon and something sitting quiet in my chest that I couldn't quite name. 3 months later, on a Tuesday morning in February of 2020, Big Mama had a second stroke. Massive this time. I got the call at 6:45 in the morning. I was at the hospital in 50 minutes. Big Mama passed at 9:17. Gloria and Kezia arrived at 12:43. Big Mama was already gone. And somewhere in a filing cabinet in a law office in Conroe, Texas, in a folder labeled Washington Estate Final Distribution, a document was waiting. Patient and precise, the way Big Mama had always been. It had been waiting for years. Grief is strange when the person you're grieving is the only one who ever truly saw you. It's not just sadness. It's something closer to vertigo. Like a fixed point you'd been navigating by your whole life had suddenly disappeared from the map. You keep reaching for it. You keep turning toward the place it used to be. And every time there's nothing there. I took 3 days off work after Big Mama passed. 3 days felt both too long and completely insufficient. I drove up to Conroe on the second day, not for any practical reason, just to be there. Just to sit in the house. Miss June had left a casserole on the porch. The garden was overgrown from the winter. The porch step I had fixed 2 years ago was still solid. The live oak tree stood in the front yard exactly as it always had, indifferent to everything that had happened, which was somehow a comfort. I sat on the porch steps for 2 hours. I didn't cry. I had already done that in the hospital parking lot alone in my car the morning she passed. I'd sat there for 40 minutes before I could drive. That was my grief private contained mine. By the time Gloria and Kezia arrived at the hospital, my face was dry and my hands were steady. Gloria cried loudly in the hallway. Kezia posted on Instagram that evening a childhood photo of herself with Big Mama captioned, "Gone too soon, heaven gained an angel." 41 people commented, 8 people shared it. I said nothing publicly. Big Mama had never been interested in being performed for. The weeks after her passing settled into a numb routine. Work, home, or work. The Conroe house sat waiting, managed by Miss June, and a property maintenance service I arranged and paid for. The estate reading was scheduled for 3 weeks of February 28th at the office of Mr. Cedric Boudreau, estate attorney on Thompson Street in Conroe. Nobody talked much about what Big Mama might have left. The land had been in the family for decades. The assumption stated out loud by Gloria at Big Mama's repast between bites of potato salad was that everything would be divided equally between her children. Gloria had one surviving sibling, Auntie Lorraine, who lived in Beaumont. Whatever Big Mama had, the 2 daughters would split it. That was the assumption. Nobody asked me what I thought. Nobody asked Naomi anything. That was the pattern. It had always been the pattern. I drove back to Houston that Sunday night and sat at my drafting table until almost midnight. Not working, just sitting. Thinking about time, how much of it I had spent in the margins of my own family, how much energy I had spent trying to earn a place at a table I was never really invited to sit at. Something was shifting in me. Something slow and tectonic, the kind of movement you don't notice until the ground has already changed beneath your feet. At work, things were moving fast. I had been at Hargrove and Associates for 8 years. In that time, I had gone from junior draftsman to project lead. I was 30 years old and I was running a significant project, a mixed-use development and community center renovation in 3rd Ward, Houston. My neighborhood. The neighborhood my great-grandparents had built something in. That project meant more to me than I knew how to say out loud. 3rd Ward had been changing for years, the kind of change that looked like progress on paper, but felt to the people who had lived there for generations, like erasure, new construction, rising rents, longtime residents being pushed further and further out. The community center project was different. It was designed to stay, to anchor, to say this place belongs to the people who built it. My senior partner, Mr. Gerald Hargrove, pulled me aside one Thursday afternoon in early March. I want to talk to you about your future here, he said. We sat in his corner office. He had a view of downtown Houston that I had always quietly coveted. "You're the best architect on my staff," he said, not as a compliment, just as a fact, stated plainly the way contractors talk about load calculations. "You've been underpaid for 3 years, and we both know it. I want to make that right." He slid a paper across the desk. Senior architect, a salary I had not expected, benefits, a named credit on all future projects. I looked at the number on the paper for a long moment. "I need a week to think," I said. He nodded. "Take 2. I walked out of that building and stood on the sidewalk in the March afternoon sun and thought about what it would mean to say yes. 8 more years at Hargrove, someone else's name on the door, good money, safe, known. And then I thought about something else. For 3 years, quietly in the evenings and on weekends, I had been building something, a business plan, a portfolio of independent projects, small ones pro bono work for community organizations, a tiny renovation for a church in Sunnyside that I had done on nights and weekends for the cost of materials. I had a name picked out. I had a financial model built in a spreadsheet I kept on a personal drive. Washington Heritage Design. The name had come to me at 2 a.m, sitting at the kitchen table the night before Big Mama's repast. I'd written it on a Post-it note and stuck it to my drafting table. It was still there. Going out on my own required capital. Not a fortune, but enough for a down payment on a small commercial space equipment software licenses, 3 months of operating expenses, while I built a client base. I had been saving for it. I was close, but not quite there. The estate reading was in 11 days. I don't know if I had allowed myself to think about it consciously, but it was there, in the back of my mind, Big Mama's voice that last Sunday on the porch. "I've taken care of things, Naomi. You won't have to worry." I didn't let myself lean on it. I had learned not to lean on things that hadn't been confirmed. But it was there. Gloria called on a Wednesday evening 9 days before the estate reading. I was reviewing blueprints at my kitchen table when my phone lit up. I answered. "Kezia's situation has gotten complicated," Gloria said. No greeting, no how are you, just the announcement the way she always started in the middle of an ongoing story I was always expected to already know. I set down my pencil. "What's going on?" "She and Darnell broke up." Darnell was Kezia's boyfriend of 2 years. He had been paying the majority of her rent. "She's behind 2 months on her apartment. They're going to put her out." I waited. "And I've been having some trouble with my own rent. You know how it's been." I knew how it had been. I had been quietly contributing to Gloria's household expenses for the better part of 4 years. Not every month, but enough. "I need you to let Kezia come stay with you," Gloria said, "just until she gets back on her feet. And maybe I come too, just for a little while." There it was. The apartment I lived in had 1 bedroom. It was 460 square feet. It was also, more importantly, mine, possibly, the only space in my entire life that had ever been entirely, uncomplicatedly mine. "Mama," I said, "I need to think about it." "What is there to think about?" "She's your sister." I said I need to think about it. A pause, long enough to be intentional. "You've always been selfish, Naomi." Her voice was even, matter of fact. The way she said things she believed so thoroughly, she'd stopped bothering to argue for them. "I don't know where you get it from. Certainly not from me." I didn't answer. We hung up 2 minutes later. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after that. The blueprints were still spread out in front of me. Third Ward, the community center, the project I had poured myself into for 8 months. I looked at the post-it note on my drafting table, Washington Heritage Design. And I thought about Big Mama's handwriting on that notebook paper 12 years ago in the envelope she had pressed into my hands on graduation day. "This land will be yours one day. Keep building, baby girl." The next morning, I drove to Conroe, alone. I parked in front of the white wood frame house. The garden was still overgrown. The oak tree stood in the yard heavy with early spring leaves. I sat on the porch steps, the step I had fixed, the one that still held, and I stayed there for a long time. The air smelled like pine and red clay and something older than I had words for. Something that had been accumulating in me for 30 years. Slowly, quietly, the way floodwater rises before anyone notices, reached a line I hadn't known was there. I wasn't angry. I want to be clear about that. It wasn't hot. It wasn't sharp. It was still, the way deep water is still. The estate reading was in 10 days. I didn't know yet what was in that filing cabinet on Thompson Street. I didn't know what Mr. Boudreau's folder contained. I didn't know what Big Mama had decided in all those years of watching and waiting and keeping her own quiet record. But sitting on that porch with the oak tree and the red clay and the smell of a place that had always felt more like home than anywhere else, I made a decision of my own. Whatever came next, I was done being the one who waited. I was done being the one who absorbed and adjusted and made herself smaller and sent money quietly and asked for nothing and expected less. I was done. Not with bitterness, not with rage. Just done. The way a door closes, gently, finally, with a sound so soft you almost miss it. The next morning, Mr. Boudreau's office called to confirm my attendance at the reading. "Yes," I said, "I'll be there." February 28th arrived gray and cold. Not cold by most standards, it was Texas, so the temperature sat around 48 degrees Fahrenheit, with a low sky the color of old concrete. But for Houston, it felt like winter. I wore my good coat, the charcoal wool one I had bought myself 2 years ago for a client presentation. I drove up to Conroe alone, leaving Houston before 7 in the morning, the highway still quiet. I had not told Gloria I was going. She knew about the reading. Mr. Boudreau's office had sent letters to all parties. But we had not spoken since the Wednesday phone call. I had not called back. I had not answered when she called twice over the weekend. There was nothing to say yet, not until after. I arrived at the office on Thompson Street at 9:45, 15 minutes early. I sat in my car and looked at the building, a small, neat brick structure with a frosted glass door and a brass nameplate, Boudreau Estate Law, Cedric J. Boudreau, attorney. I thought about Big Mama driving past this office at some point, parking, walking in, sitting across from Mr. Boudreau and telling him clearly and precisely what she wanted done. Big Mama had never been vague about anything in her life. She would have been specific. She would have had her documents organized. She would have asked questions. I thought about her handwriting on that notebook paper. "This land will be yours one day." I got out of the car. The waiting room was small, 2 chairs against one wall, a low table with a plant on it that was either thriving or artificial, I couldn't tell. A window looking out at the parking lot. Auntie Lorraine was already there. She stood when I walked in. She was dressed in navy blue, her silver hair pinned back, her reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She looked at me the way she always looked at me, directly, without performance. She opened her arms. I walked into them. We didn't say anything for a moment. Then she pulled back and held my face in both hands, the way older Black women do when they want you to actually receive what they're about to say. "Whatever happens in there," she said, "you hold your head up, you hear me?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good." She sat back down. I sat beside her. Gloria and Kezia arrived at 10:12, together. Gloria was dressed carefully, a burgundy blazer, pressed slacks, her church earrings, the ones she wore when she wanted to be taken seriously. Kezia wore a black wrap dress and kept her eyes down when she walked in. Gloria looked at me. I looked back. Neither of us spoke. Mr. Boudreau came out at 10:15 exactly. He was a trim man in his 60s with close-cropped gray hair and the measured manner of someone who had sat across from grieving families for 30 years and understood that his job was precision, not comfort. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "Please come in." We sat on one side of a long wooden table. Mr. Boudreau sat across from us. He had a folder in front of him, dark blue thick, held together with a binder clip. He set it on the table without opening it. "Before we begin," he said, "I want to note that Mrs. Celestine May Washington was exceptionally thorough in her estate planning. She updated this document most recently in October of 2019, 4 months before her passing. Everything here reflects her final considered wishes." Gloria nodded. Her hands were folded in her lap, composed, expectant. Kezia was looking at the plant on the credenza behind Mr. Boudreau. Auntie Lorraine was looking at the folder. I was looking at my hands. Mr. Boudreau opened the folder. He began with the smaller items. A jewelry box to Auntie Lorraine's specific pieces described by name, things Big Mama had worn for decades. A monetary gift to Greater New Hope Baptist Church, a small savings bond to a grandniece in Dallas. Then he paused. He turned a page. The primary assets of the estate, he said, consist of the following: the residential property at, he read the Conroe address, including the dwelling, all outbuildings, and all fixtures, and the accompanying land, 38 acres as surveyed and recorded with Montgomery County. Additionally, a savings account held at First National Bank of Conroe, with a current balance of $42,317. He looked up. All of the above are bequeathed in their entirety to Naomi Jean Washington. The room did not make a sound. 1 second, 2 seconds. Then Gloria's chair scraped back from the table. It happened fast, the way things happen when a body moves before a mind has caught up. The chair legs caught on the carpet and the whole thing tilted and would have fallen if it hadn't hit the wall behind her. Gloria was on her feet. Her composure, so carefully assembled, was gone. "That's wrong," she said. Her voice was not loud, it was tight, compressed. "That has to be wrong." Mr. Boudreau did not flinch. "Mrs. Washington, the document is correct. Your mother was very specific. She would not have left this house too." Gloria stopped. She looked at me. Something moved across her face that I had never seen there before. Not anger, or not only anger. Something underneath the anger. Something older and raw, and I realized frightened. "There is also a letter," Mr. Boudreau said. He removed an envelope from the folder. It was sealed with tape, the old-fashioned kind, and had one name written on the front in Big Mama's handwriting. "Gloria." He held it out across the table. Gloria did not move for a moment. Then she took it. She stood there holding it. Not opening it, just holding it. "Would you like a moment?" Mr. Boudreau asked. Gloria shook her head. She sat back down, not in her chair, which was still tilted against the wall, but in the chair beside Kezia. She opened the envelope. The room was so quiet I could hear the paper unfold. I watched my mother read. I watched her face move through things I did not have names for. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes went still the way eyes go still when they are reading something they cannot argue with. Her left hand flat on the table, pressed down slowly like she needed to feel something solid. She read it once, then again. Then she set it face down on the table. Kezia reached for her mother's arm. Gloria let her. Mr. Boudreau looked at me. "Miss Washington, I have a copy of the letter for you as well per your grandmother's instructions." He passed me an envelope, my name on the front. Same handwriting. I did not open it in that room. I opened it in my car, alone in the parking lot on Thompson Street with the gray Texas sky overhead and the heater running low. I unfolded Big Mama's letter to me. It was 2 pages, both sides of one sheet of lined notebook paper written in her large, careful hand, the hand that had trembled since her first stroke, but had not stopped being precise. She told me things I had known and things I hadn't. She told me she had watched. That she had been watching for decades, every Easter dress, every refrigerator, every graduation that Gloria had missed, and every one she had attended herself. She named specific things. Specific years, the math assessment, the design competition, the scholarship, the money I had sent home month after month without being asked and without being thanked. "You held this family," she wrote. "You held it while they called you nothing. I am not going to pretend that was fair because it was not. It was not fair, and I am sorry I could not fix it sooner. But I can fix it now. The land goes to the one who earned it. The land goes to the one who builds." The last paragraph was short. "Don't let them make you feel guilty for this. Not for one single minute. I gave this to you because you are the one who will do something with it. Not something for yourself alone, something real. Something that lasts. I know you, Naomi Jean. I have always known you. Build something that matters. Put my name on it if you want to. I wouldn't mind." I sat in that parking lot for 45 minutes. I read the letter 4 times. Yeah, I did not cry until the third reading. And then I cried the way you cry when something you have been holding for a very long time finally gets put down, not with sadness, but with release. With the particular relief of being seen completely and without condition by the one person whose seeing had always meant the most. Big Mama had known. She had always known. And she had done the only thing she could do with that knowledge. She had built it into something that would outlast her. That night my phone lit up with a message from Gloria. Not an apology. Not even close. "We need to talk about the house," it said. "Call me." I set the phone face down on my drafting table, and something inside me went very, very still. Not the still of defeat, the still of decision. I did not call Gloria back that night. I did not call her the next day either, or the day after that. I let the silence sit there, not as punishment, not as strategy, just as space. I needed space to think without her voice in it. I went back to work. I finished the Third Ward Community Center drawings. I sat across from Gerald Hargrove and told him I appreciated the offer genuinely without performance, and that I was not going to take it. He was quiet for a moment. "You're going out on your own," he said. "Yes." He nodded slowly. I figured it was coming. He leaned back in his chair. "You going to compete with me?" "Not directly. Different work." What kind of work? I told him about Washington Heritage Design. The concept, historic preservation, community, anchored development, affordable housing, HBCU campus work. The kind of projects that fell between the cracks of the large commercial firms because the margins were too thin and the neighborhoods too overlooked. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Send me your first proposal when you're ready. I'll write you a reference letter today." I walked out of Gerald Hargrove's office for the last time on a Friday afternoon in April of 2020. 8 years. I shook hands with everyone. I took my drafting tools, my personal files, and the Post-it note from my desk, Washington Heritage Design. I drove home with the windows down. 18 months that followed were the hardest and the most alive I had ever felt. I registered the business in May. I leased a small studio space on Emancipation Avenue in 3rd Ward, 400 square feet, second-floor windows facing east. The morning light was extraordinary. I painted the walls white myself over a weekend, listening to old-school Houston rap, and drinking coffee from a thermos. I used a portion of Big Mama's savings, $30,000, as operating capital. I did not spend it carelessly. Every dollar had a purpose and a plan. The remaining $12,000 stayed untouched as a reserve. The Conroe property I handled separately. I hired a surveyor and a real estate attorney, a woman named Paulette Osei, sharp and efficient, who had grown up in 5th Ward and understood exactly what I was trying to do. Together, we mapped the 38 acres. I set aside 10 acres, the house, the garden, the oak tree, the land immediately surrounding them as my own. The remaining 28 acres I earmarked for development. Not for profit, for people. Affordable housing, workforce housing. The kind of homes that families in Montgomery County, Black families, working families getting priced out of Houston's inner loop could actually afford to buy. I partnered with a community development nonprofit out of Conroe called Roots Forward. Their director, a quiet man named Marcus Webb, had been trying to build affordable units in the area for 6 years and kept hitting walls because no one would donate workable land. When I called him, he was silent for so long I thought the call had dropped. "You're serious?" he finally said. I'm serious. Miss Washington, do you know how long I've been waiting for a call like this? We signed a development agreement in August. Phase 1, 14 units on 8 acres designed by Washington Heritage Design, built in partnership with 3 local contractors, all Black-owned, all from the Houston metro area. The kind of project that circulated money within the community instead of extracting it. I designed every unit myself, not cookie-cutter boxes, real homes, front porches, natural light, storage, yards where children could actually play. I thought about the house on Dowling Street where my great-grandparents had built something out of nothing. I thought about Big Mama's tin roof in her vegetable garden and the way the oak tree made everything feel permanent. I built that feeling into the plans. Washington Heritage Design's first paying client came through Dr. Okafor, my old studio professor, who had stayed in touch over the years and now served on the board of a small HBCU in Huntsville, Texas. They needed a campus master plan update. The budget was modest, the work was meaningful. I delivered the plan 6 weeks early. Dr. Okafor called me afterward. "Naomi," she said, "this is the best work I have seen come out of a firm this size. I'm sending your name to every HBCU board I sit on, and I sit on 4. Sit on. By the end of the first year, Washington Heritage Design had 5 active projects. By the end of 18 months, we had 9. I had hired 2 junior architects, both recent Prairie View graduates, and a part-time office manager. The Houston Architecture Foundation nominated me for their Emerging Practice Award. I was one of 3 finalists. I did not win that year, but I was in the room, and the room noticed. Essence magazine reached out in the fall, a feature on Black women architects building community-centered practices across the South. A writer named Simone drove down from Atlanta and spent 2 days following me through job sites and client meetings. The piece ran in the December issue alongside a photograph taken outside the Conroe house, me on the porch steps, the oak tree behind me, the sky wide and open above it all. The caption read, "Building on Inherited Ground." Big Mama would have loved that caption. I framed it and hung it in the studio on Emancipation Avenue above my drafting table, right next to the Post-it note. In all of that time, the 18 months of building and hiring and designing and filing and negotiating and presenting, I heard from Gloria intermittently. The calls were shorter now, less demanding. She had learned after the first few unreturned messages that the old approach no longer worked. I would not be guilted into decisions. I would not be rushed. I would not absorb things silently and send money and ask for nothing. That version of me was gone. I was not cold to her. I want to be clear about that. I answered when I could. I kept the conversation civil. I asked about her health. I asked about Kezia. I told her about work in general terms. But I kept the distance. I needed the distance. And then on a Tuesday morning in November, 14 months after the estate reading, 8 months after I had opened the studio, my phone rang. Not Gloria, Kezia. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Kezia had not called me directly in years. We communicated through Gloria the way our family communicated, everything triangulated indirect, never quite face-to-face. I answered, "Naomi." Her voice was different, smaller than I remembered it. The easy confidence she had worn her whole life, the confidence of someone who had always been chosen first, was gone. What was left underneath it sounded young and tired, and for the first time I could recall genuinely uncertain. "Naomi, please," she said. "We don't have anywhere to go." I sat with the phone in my hand for a long moment after Kezia spoke. Outside my studio window, Emancipation Avenue was moving through its Tuesday morning, a delivery truck idling at the corner. 2 women walking a dog, a kid on a bicycle cutting across the intersection without looking. Ordinary life indifferent to what was happening on the second floor above it. "Tell me what's going on," I said. Kezia talked for about 10 minutes. The story came out in pieces, not quite in order the way things come out when someone has been holding them too long, and finally lets go all at once. Darnell had ended things in September. Not a mutual decision. He had simply stopped paying his half of their shared apartment, stopped responding to texts, stopped coming home until Kezia finally understood that he was gone, and the lease was entirely her problem. She had been trying to cover it alone since October. She had a part-time job at a salon on Westheimer shampooing folding towels, scheduling appointments that paid $11 an hour. The rent on the apartment was $1,200 a month. The math did not work and had never worked, and Kezia had known it and kept hoping something would change. Nothing had changed. The landlord had filed notice. She had 30 days. And Gloria let Kezia get to this part herself without asking had her own problem running parallel. The apartment she rented in Sunnyside, the one she had lived in for 11 years, had been sold to a developer the previous spring. The new owner had raised the rent by $450 a month starting in January. Gloria had been paying it by drawing down her savings a reserve that had now run out completely. She had 2 months of unpaid rent. Her landlord had been patient, she said. He was not going to be patient much longer. I listened to all of it without interrupting. When Kezia finished, the line was quiet for a moment. "Naomi, I know I don't have any right to ask you for anything," she said. Her voice was careful, deliberate, like she had rehearsed this part. "I know that. I'm not asking you to fix it. I just don't know what else to do." I believed her. That was the thing that surprised me. I believed that she didn't know what else to do because Kezia had never been taught to know. Gloria had spent 30 years making sure Kezia never had to figure anything out alone. And now for the first time, she was alone. And she was 34 years old, and she did not have the tools. That wasn't entirely her fault. It wasn't entirely not her fault either, but it was the truth. "I hear you," I said. "Give me a few days." That afternoon, I drove to Sunnyside. I had the address from a card Gloria had sent me 2 Christmases ago. One of those generic holiday cards with a printed signature, the kind that takes 30 seconds to put in an envelope. I had kept it anyway, filed it in the small box where I kept things I wasn't ready to throw away. I found the building on a side street off Reed Road. A 2-story apartment complex, tan brick iron railings on the exterior staircase, a parking lot with 2 broken light fixtures, a dumpster that needed emptying. Gloria's car, a 2014 Camry with a dented rear panel, was parked in the far corner of the lot. I recognized it from the one time I had helped her take it in for an oil change 4 years ago, before I had learned to stop filling every silence with a task. I parked and sat in my car. I had not planned what I was going to say. That was intentional. I had learned from years of watching Big Mama handle difficult things that the most important conversations were the ones you didn't script. Scripts made people perform. The truth needed room to move. I called Gloria's number. She answered on the second ring. "Naomi." "I'm in your parking lot," I said. "Come down." A pause. "You're here." "I'm here." 3 minutes later, Gloria came through the ground floor door. She was wearing a house dress and slippers, the kind of clothes she would never have let anyone outside the family see her in when I was growing up. Her hair was wrapped, no church earrings, no burgundy blazer. She looked smaller than I remembered. That was the first thing I noticed. Not smaller in height, she hadn't shrunk, but smaller in the way people look when the armor they've worn for decades has been set down, not by choice, but by circumstance, because they no longer have the energy to keep it on. She walked to my car and got in the passenger seat. We sat looking at the parking lot. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then Gloria said quietly without looking at me, "I don't know how we got here." I thought about that, about all the ways I could answer it, about the Easter dresses and the refrigerator and the math assessment and the family reunion and the chair falling backward in Mr. Boudreau's office, about 30 years of weight distributed so unevenly that one side had collapsed. I knew exactly how we had gotten here, but this was not the moment to say it. That moment would come. It wasn't now. "I know," I said. She looked at me then. Really looked the way she almost never had. Not appraising, not comparing. Just looking the way you look at someone when you have finally run out of defenses. "I was so hard on you," she said. The words came out flat and plain with none of her usual armor. I know I was. It was not an apology. It was not nearly enough, but it was the first honest thing she had said to me in 31 years, and I received it as what it was, not as settlement, not as closure, but as a beginning of something that might, with time and effort on both sides, become something real. I looked out through the windshield at her dented Camry, at the broken parking lot lights, at the building that had been sold out from under her. I thought about Big Mama's last paragraph. "Don't let them make you feel guilty. I gave this to you because you are the one who will do something with it. Not something for yourself alone, something real. I thought about the 10 acres I had kept, the white wood frame house, the oak tree, the garden that needed tending. I thought about what it meant to build something that lasted. I thought about what Big Mama would do. I drove home that evening and sat at my drafting table for a long time. The city lights of Houston spread out beyond my window. The Third Ward skyline, my neighborhood, the neighborhood my great-grandparents had built something in, ran along the horizon in the dark. I opened my laptop. I opened a new document, and I started writing two things simultaneously. The first was a call to Auntie Lorraine, who picked up on the first ring the way she always did, as if she had been waiting. The second was a message to Paulette Osei, my attorney. The subject line was simple: the Conroe House temporary occupancy terms. Let's talk. I did not make those decisions from guilt. I did not make them from fear. I made them from the same place I made every good decision in my life, from the part of me that Big Mama had recognized on a church porch in Third Ward when I was 7 years old and had never stopped believing in since. The part that built things. Not for applause, not for credit, just because something needed to exist that hadn't existed before. When I walked into that house in Conroe the following Saturday, when I sat Gloria and Kezia down at Big Mama's kitchen table with the oak tree visible through the window, and the smell of the place still exactly as I remembered, every head turned toward me. And for the first time in my life, I was not the burden in that room. I was the architect. The Saturday I chose was the second weekend of December. I drove up to Conroe the night before and stayed in the house alone. I wanted one more evening in it, before it changed, before other people's presence filled the rooms and rearranged the air. I made tea in Big Mama's kitchen. I sat at her table. I listened to the house settle around me, the way old houses do small sounds, unhurried like breathing. I had spent 3 weekends over the fall getting the house ready. Not renovated, not yet. That was a longer project, one I was planning carefully. But livable. The plumbing checked. The heating unit serviced. The porch repainted. The garden cleared back so it wasn't overtaking the walkway. I had bought 2 beds, basic but good, and set them up in the 2 back bedrooms. I had stocked the kitchen with essentials. Miss June from next door had helped me hang new curtains in the front room. She had known Big Mama for 37 years, and she moved through that house with a quiet reverence that I appreciated more than I could say. Celestine would be glad this place is staying in the family, Miss June told me, smoothing a curtain panel with her hand. She worried about it toward the end. She didn't need to worry, I said. Miss June looked at me. No, I don't suppose she did. Gloria and Kezia arrived at 11 in the morning. I heard the Camry in the driveway and stood at the kitchen window for a moment before going to the door. 2 women with 2 bags each standing in the winter light beside a dented car in front of a house that had belonged to their family for 3 generations and now belonged entirely to me. I opened the door before they knocked. Gloria stepped onto the porch first. She looked up at the house. Really looked the way you look at something you haven't allowed yourself to look at properly in years. The repainted porch, the cleared garden. The oak tree bare in December, its branches wide and patient against the pale sky. Something moved across her face. She didn't speak. Kezia came up the steps behind her carrying a duffel bag and a tote that clinked bottles of something cooking supplies. She met my eyes briefly and then looked down. "Come in," I said. I had set the kitchen table before they arrived, 4 chairs. Auntie Lorraine was already inside. She had driven over from Beaumont that morning, arriving at 9:30 with a pound cake and the same steady presence she had carried her whole life. She sat at the far end of the table with her coffee and her reading glasses, and said nothing when Gloria and Kezia walked in, just nodded once the way she nodded when something had been a long time coming. Gloria looked at Auntie Lorraine. A flicker of something surprise, maybe, or the recognition that this conversation had witnesses. She sat down. Kezia sat beside her. I sat across from them. The pound cake was in the center of the table. Nobody touched it. I had thought about how to begin this for 2 weeks. I had drafted versions of it in my head during long drives and late nights. I had considered being formal. I had considered being warm. I had considered every register between them. In the end, I decided to be plain. Big Mama had always been plain. It was the most honest thing I knew how to be. I want to tell you both what I'm offering, I said. And I want to be clear about what it is and what it isn't. And then I'm going to need you to tell me if you can accept it. Gloria's hands were on the table, flat still. She nodded. You can stay in this house, I said, both of you, rent-free for the first 6 months, starting January 1st. Kezia looked up. After 6 months, the arrangement moves to a formal lease at $800 a month below market rate for this area, but real. It's not charity indefinitely. It's a foundation. There's a difference. Gloria opened her mouth. I kept going. During those 6 months, I need 2 things. Kezia, I need you enrolled in something. A certificate program, a vocational course, anything that moves you toward being able to support yourself long term. There are programs at Lone Star College in Conroe that start in January. I've already looked them up. Medical Coding HVAC Certification Culinary Arts. I'll send you the links today. Kezia said nothing, but she was listening. Gloria, I looked at my mother directly. I need you to meet with a financial counselor. The Church Greater New Hope has a financial literacy ministry. I already spoke to the director. She's expecting your call. The kitchen was quiet. Outside, a mockingbird started up in the oak tree. One long, looping call, and then silence. Gloria looked at the table. Not at me. At the surface of the table, the same table where Big Mama had served Sunday dinners for 40 years, where she had written letters in her large, careful handwriting, where she had pressed an envelope into my hands on a warm graduation morning and told me to keep building. So you're going to make conditions, Gloria said. Her voice was low. Not angry, something past anger. Something that sounded underneath like shame. On your own mother. I'm giving you a home, Mama. My voice was steady. I had practiced being steady. I'm giving you a home and time and a starting point. That's more than I ever had from you. I'm not saying that to hurt you. I'm saying it because it's the truth, and we've been a family that doesn't say true things out loud, and I'm done with that. Silence. I'm not your burden anymore, I said, and you are not my debt. But I am your daughter, and Big Mama's granddaughter. And that means I don't leave people with nowhere to go even when they've given me every reason to. Gloria's jaw tightened. Her eyes were bright. She was not going to cry. Gloria Washington did not cry in front of people that had always been her particular armor, but something was cracking behind her eyes that had nothing to do with tears. Kezia spoke first. Naomi. Her voice was quiet, smaller than it had been on the phone even. Thank you. 2 words, plain and direct, no performance in them. I looked at my sister, 34 years old, sitting in our grandmother's kitchen with her hands in her lap, looking like someone who had finally run out of road and was learning for the first time what it felt like to stand still. I thought about what I had said to Auntie Lorraine the night before on the phone, about how Kezia was not the villain, she was the product. That Gloria had needed a pride and a burden, a trophy and a scapegoat, and she had cast her daughters in those roles before either of them was old enough to consent to the part. Kezia had not been saved by that casting. She had been limited by it. She just hadn't known it until the scaffolding collapsed. Auntie Lorraine set down her coffee cup. Diane. She said Gloria's middle name, the name the family had always used when something needed to land. That child just offered you more grace than you gave her in 30 years. I suggest you receive it. The mockingbird called again outside. Gloria looked at me for a long moment, the longest she had ever really looked at me, I think, without comparison, without calculation, without the measuring gaze I had grown up beneath, just looking. Then she nodded. Small, slow, not thank you, not I'm sorry. Not the words I had waited for my whole life and had finally somewhere over the last 18 months stopped waiting for. But a nod, an acknowledgement. It was not enough to repair 30 years. I knew that. I was not asking it to be. But it was a door cracked open. And I was the one who had decided whether to build it or board it up. I had decided to build. I drove back to Houston that evening alone. The highway stretched out in front of me, the city lights coming up on the horizon, the December sky wide and dark and full of stars. For the first time in my life, I was not driving away from something. I was driving toward it. I was done being invisible. I was done being the burden. I was done being the daughter who asked for nothing and received less. I knew exactly what I was worth, and it had nothing to do with what Gloria Washington had ever been willing to see. It is autumn now. The live oak tree in Conroe has gone the deep, dry gold that Texas trees manage in October, not the bright carnival of New England falls I had seen in architecture magazines, but something quieter and more permanent, the kind of color that knows it will come back, the kind that doesn't need to perform. I am 31 years old. Washington Heritage Design is 2 years old. And I am sitting at my drafting table on Emancipation Avenue in the studio I built, from a blank room and a Post-it note looking at a set of plans that would have seemed impossible to me 3 years ago. The plans are for a library. Galveston County Community Library, Branch 4, a new construction building on the west side of the island in a neighborhood that has never had a branch library within walking distance. The contract is the largest Washington Heritage Design has signed to date. It came through a competitive bid process. 12 firms submitted proposals. We were selected unanimously by the County Review Board. My junior architect, a 24-year-old Prairie View graduate named Destiny, put her head on her desk when I told her we had won. Then she sat up and said very seriously, "I need a raise." I gave her a raise. The Conroe development. The 28 acres is now in its second phase. Phase 1 finished in the spring, 14 homes, 8 acres every unit occupied. The families who moved in came from Houston, from Conroe, from communities that had been watching affordable housing disappear for a decade. A grandmother and her 2 grandchildren. A young couple expecting their first baby. A man who had worked at a Conroe lumberyard for 22 years and had never been able to afford to own anything. On the day the first family got their keys, Marcus Webb from Roots Forward called me. "You need to come see this," he said. I drove up that afternoon. The family, a woman named Brenda and her teenage son, were standing on the front porch of their new home. It was a simple house. Good bones, real materials. A front porch wide enough for a rocking chair and a table. A yard, a mailbox with their name on it. Brenda was holding the key with both hands. She looked at me and said, "Nobody ever built something for me before." I did not have words for that moment. I still don't. I just nodded and shook her hand and drove back to Houston with the windows down and the radio off. I named the development Celestine Gardens, Big Mama's first name in full on every site map and every county filing, and the small iron sign Marcus had made for the entrance. Celestine Gardens Phase 1. Phase 2 will add 22 more units on the remaining land. Groundbreaking is scheduled for February. Gloria and Kezia have been in the Conroe house for 11 months. The 6-month rent-free period ended in June. In July, Gloria transferred $800 to my account for the first time. She has done it every month since. She did not make a ceremony of it. She sent the money and texted 2 words, "rent sent." That was enough. Kezia enrolled at Lone Star College in January. Medical coding certificate program, 12 months fully online with a clinical component in the spring. She finished in October. She passed her certification exam on the first attempt. She has a job offer from a medical group in the Woodlands, starting in January, $22 an hour, full benefits. She called me when she found out. "I passed," she said. That was all, but her voice had something in it I had never heard before. Not the easy confidence of someone who had always been chosen, but something earned. Something real, something that belonged entirely to her. "I know you did," I said. "I knew you would." She was quiet for a moment. "Naomi, I've been thinking about a lot of things, about how things were, how I was." She stopped, started again. "I don't think I ever really saw what was happening to you, to us. I think I believed what Mama showed me. That's not an excuse. I know it's not. But I wanted you to know that I see it now." I sat with that for a moment. It was not a complete accounting. It was not everything that needed to be said. But it was real. It was honest. It was more than I had expected from Kezia, who had spent 30 years in a role that had never required her to look closely at anything. "Thank you for saying that," I told her, and I meant it. Gloria and I are careful with each other. That is the most accurate way I know to describe it. Careful the way you are careful around something that has been broken and partially mended. You don't pretend the break didn't happen. You don't push on the repaired place to test it. You just move around it with awareness, and you give it time, and you see what holds. She has not said I'm sorry in the way I once imagined she might, some cinematic moment of reckoning full of tears and explicit acknowledgement. That version of Gloria may not exist. I have made peace with that. A long time ago, I stopped building my healing around what she was or wasn't capable of giving. But she has changed in smaller ways that are, I think, more real. She calls once a week now. The conversations last longer than 4 minutes. Sometimes she asks about my work, genuinely asks, wants to know what I'm building and where. Last month, she told me she had seen the article in Essence, the one with the photograph on the porch, and that she had shown it to the ladies at Greater New Hope. They were very impressed, she said. I almost laughed, not bitterly, just at the strangeness of it, the long winding distance between the woman who had set my 97 on the counter without a word and the woman who was showing my magazine feature to her church friends. I'm glad, I said, and I was. Thanksgiving came early this year. The Saturday before the holiday, I drove up to Conroe. Gloria had been cooking since Thursday. I could smell it from the driveway when I pulled in. Red beans, cornbread, something with sweet potatoes. The smells of the house exactly as they had been when Big Mama was alive, carried forward now by her daughter's hands, whether she meant to carry them or not. Auntie Lorraine came over from Beaumont. Kezia made a sweet potato pie from scratch, her first attempt, slightly lopsided, extremely good. We ate at Big Mama's kitchen table, the same chairs. I sat in the seat where Big Mama used to sit. Nobody said anything about that. Nobody needed to. After dinner, when the dishes were done and Gloria was watching television in the front room and Kezia was on the phone with someone from her new job, I slipped outside alone. The October air was cool and clean. The oak tree stood in the front yard, its gold leaves catching the porch light, casting long shadows across the garden bed that Miss June had helped me replant in the spring-collared greens and herbs along the east fence, exactly where Big Mama had always kept them. I sat on the porch steps, the step I had fixed years ago, the one that still held. I looked up at the tree for a long time. I thought about Big Mama on this porch, about the Sunday afternoons and the sweet tea and the particular quiet of this place, the quiet that felt full rather than empty. I thought about what she had written. Build something that matters. Put my name on it if you want to. I wouldn't mind. I had put her name on it. I was still building. And for the first time in my life, sitting on the porch of a house I owned in the cooling Texas autumn, with the smell of red beans and cornbread still warm in the air behind me, I felt something I had spent 31 years searching for without knowing I was searching. Not approval, not validation, not the particular ache of being seen by someone who could not see you. Just peace, whole, quiet, undemanding peace. The kind that doesn't need a witness, the kind that belongs entirely to you. I had built it myself. Out of everything they said I couldn't do and everything Big Mama knew I could and all the years in between, I had built it, and it was real, and it was mine. Some families teach you who to become. Others teach you who not to become. Both are valuable if you're willing to do the work of learning. You don't need anyone's permission to know your own worth. And you don't owe anyone your presence, not even family, at the cost of your peace. Build what matters. Put your name on it. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to set a boundary with family? How did it change your life? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, check out the video in the description. Until next time, take care of yourself. You deserve it.